Good evening, viewers. Thank you very much for joining us here on Nation Wants to Know, and I'm Heena Gambhir. Viewers, on 26th of August, the heavens unleashed an unmerciful hell in the northern courtyard of our neighboring nation, Nepal. Scientific judgment on the event is here. It says a glacier collapse and ensuing ice rock avalanche triggered a massive flash flood near the Nepal-Tibet border. But a tragedy brings grief which can't be reconciled to and can't be explained. The death toll in a tsunami-like wave flowing through the Himalayan valley stands at 538. Nearly 1,500 are still missing. On the 26th, the skies were clear and blue. A glacial collapse sent millions of tons of ice and rock into the river systems. The mud, rock and flood water descended like a messenger of death. Experts say it traveled the first 22 kilometers at an average speed, believe it or not, 193 kilometers per hour, covering 22 kilometers in just 6 minutes. Yes, just 6 minutes. Powerful flood waters and debris traveled some 62 miles or 100 kilometers downstream from Trishuli and Botikoshi rivers. The victims who survived don't know where to restart, but what invited death and disaster to their homes. Viewers, the blame can be pinned at the doors of something invisible we humans have constructed and contributed to. Like a ticking doomsday clock, it has been growing. The Nepal tragedy has underlined that climate change is driving faster glacial melt in the Hindu Kush Himalaya region. The warnings are loud. The permafrost is barely managing to hold some mountain sides together. This permafrost is warming. More landslides are predicted. Can tragedy visit India? That's the big question. India's Himalayan arc, Jammu and Kashmir, Ladakh in the west, Himachal Pradesh and Uttarakhand in the center, and Sikkim and Arunachal Pradesh in the east sits atop thousands of glacial lakes, many of them swelling year after year as glaciers retreat. Ice loss rates from glaciers across Nepal and India have doubled since 2000. What's the risk? Nearly 2 million people living downstream face clear danger. Remember the October 3rd, 2023 glacial lake outburst flood in Sikkim, South Lonak Lake? It caused a catastrophic flood through the Tista Basin, killing and displacing people and destroying bridges, roads, and power infrastructure. Around 14.7 million cubic meters of frozen lateral moraine collapsed into the lake. And then remember Chamoli flood of 2021? We'll show you the visuals also of Chamoli flood in 2021, in which around 27 million cubic meters of rock and ice released from Ronti Peak killed over 200 people and destroyed 2 major under-construction hydropower facilities. Due to melting glaciers, the Chenab Basin recorded an increase in lakes from just 55 in 2001 to 254 in 2018, an increase of 462% in just 18 years. And now, Nepal flash floods clearly are a warning. And then there is a China factor as well. Now, this is very crucial. China has been constructing and altering the landscape in the fragile, seismically active Himalayas. Soon after the tragedy hit Nepal, a monitoring station downstream lost its data feed. You know, in 2017, China stopped sharing hydrological data on the Brahmaputra River with India during the peak monsoon season, amid the 73-day military standoff with India at Doklam. The reason they gave was equipment repairs. But viewers, you will be shocked to know that at the same time, Bangladesh kept getting the data the entire time. Last year, Arunachal Chief Minister Pema Khandu termed the world's largest dam project on Yarlung Sangpo River, the Tibetan name for Brahmaputra, a ticking water bomb. The proposed over 1 kilometer high Medoc hydro plant will churn out 60 gigawatt of power for China, while it sits directly above an active geological structure known as the Paisan Fault. Now try joining the dots here. China has a large dam on Brahmaputra. If a monitoring station goes dark, data isn't shared. Experts worry China could use a super dam for strategic flooding or leverage water control during political or military conflicts. A geopolitical weapon is set to become a threat for unsuspecting Indians living downstream in the Brahmaputra basin. That's the question that's being asked. And that's why tonight we're going to discuss how prepared are we for the disasters like the one that hit Nepal, or a disaster which can be manufactured as a strategy? Let's welcome our guests who are joining us on the discussion this evening. We have Govind Raj Pokhrel, ex-VC, National Planning Commission; Zerin Osho, Director of the India Program at the Institute for Governance and Sustainable Development; Brahmachalani, Strategic Affairs Expert. And thank you very much, all of you, for joining us here on this debate. Brahmachalani, let me begin this discussion with you. Are we staring at a water time bomb? Okay, we'll go across to Brahmachalani in just a bit. In fact, let me go across to my other guest first, Professor Govind Raj Pokhrel. If I begin this discussion with you, how worrying is the situation, in your opinion, for India, given what has happened in Nepal?
I think, as you already briefly highlighted, that the main issue is data sharing, because, because of the climate change and then lots of activities, development activities, construction of roads, building dams, and many things. That is triggering these types of flood because of glove or landslide or ice melt, whatever it may be. So we need to have some sort of data sharing mechanism, early warning system, and that is lacking. Today only Chinese government has shared some data with Nepalese government when there was a second flood coming from Tibetan side or border of Tibet and Nepal. But in the long term, because the Tibet part of the China is in upper stream, and India from like Arunachal to Jammu Kashmir and Nepal, we are in downstream. And small activities or small glacier melt or ice rock falls, that will have a big impact in our areas, including India, because it's a not big distance average. If you see the northern side of Nepal and southern side of India, and because of this steep or gradient, the speed of flow, volume of water will have impact in Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, and many plain areas of Nepal as well. That's why what we learned, I was expecting that China could have or should have shared information with us in the first, like the day before yesterday.
Okay.
But after realizing that they have also huge losses, especially the custom area. Many people were also missing, and they found 3 Chinese dead. So last year also many Chinese died, and there was an understanding between Nepal and China that they will share the data. But I am surprised why they couldn't find or they could not trace these types of activities that were happening.
Okay.
Because first there was a landslide. Then was a artificial lake was built because of the landslide.
Right.
Then at least 18 kilometer of like travel time is at least 10 minutes, if you see, because it's a water traveling 20 kilometer. So you have at least 25-30 minutes, half an hour time.
Okay.
That could have saved, thousands of lives, because that's surprising.
Right. Okay, those are some very interesting points you've made. And of course, data sharing is extremely important. And that's the reason why role of China here is being questioned as well. And Dr. Swapnamita Vaideshwaran is also joining us on the broadcast. She's scientist, Wadia Institute of Himalayan Geology. Mr. Brahmachalani is also live with us, Strategic Affairs Expert. Good evening to both of you as well. Now, Brahmachalani, the question really is that, China has a large dam on Brahmaputra. If a monitoring station goes dark, data isn't shared, then there is a problem for India. Just last year, Pema Khandu, the Arunachal Pradesh Chief Minister, in fact, spoke about that particular super dam and had called it a ticking water bomb. What is it that India can really do to safeguard its interest?
India needs to speak up. Silence cannot be the right approach. After all, China's own scientists have recently published a paper in a state-linked journal in which they have highlighted serious geological hazards that this super dam poses. So India should, at a minimum, break its silence. It should raise this issue in multilateral forums because this super dam poses enormous risks for the millions of people living downstream in India and in Bangladesh, especially the people living in the Assam Valley, because if this dam were to fail, the main impact will be borne by the Brahmaputra Valley in Assam, which is home to tens of millions of people. This is clearly a water bomb in the making. China is building what would become the world's largest dam on the Brahmaputra River, just a few kilometers from the India border. To make, the risks are apparent from the fact that where this dam is coming up is one of the planet's most seismically unstable zones. This dam is coming beside a geological fault. Warnings from Chinese scientists about what is known as scientifically as reservoir-triggered seismicity. Those warnings are not just theoretical. Some years ago, there was this devastating earthquake in China on the eastern rim of the Tibetan Plateau, killing almost 90,000 people, mainly in Sichuan province.
Right.
This was the worst natural disaster in modern Chinese history. And a number of scientists, including from China, later concluded that this particular disaster, the earthquake, was created by reservoir-triggered seismicity in a new dam called the Zimbabwe Dam that had come up a couple of years earlier. The weight of the water in the dam's reservoir created tectonic stresses, thereby advancing the earthquake by decades or possibly by centuries.
Right.
So reservoir-triggered seismicity is not a phenomenon that can be discounted. But when China's own scientists have recently underscored the geological risks that this super dam poses, it's incumbent on the Indian government to raise this issue publicly and multilaterally.
Okay, and now there is another reason for India to really raise this particular issue, given the kind of tragedy we have seen unfolding in Nepal. We have to take it very, very seriously. Dr. Swapna Mehta, I want to just quote some data to you. You know, in July 2014, Dr. Jitendra Singh, the then Minister of Science and Technology and Earth Sciences, had said as many as 672 dams, in fact, are located in India's most seismically active areas that are prone to the most devastating earthquakes. So this is the threat that's within our territory.
Yes, absolutely. We are actually already aware of the threats, and we have seen what kind of disasters we have had in the recent past, including the Chamoli disaster, the Rishiganga event where we lost so many people. We definitely have the Kedarnath, which is like a mega disaster, and also the Dharali. So I think instead of having a reactive step, we should go into a proactive action mode. And we should start assessing our data, bringing them into a national database, collate all the data that we have together, bringing them under one umbrella to understand what we already have and what we need to do to understand the risk from all these glaciers and the glacier lakes that are there. And also, the glacier system is a dynamic system. It is not like, today the lake is there and maybe the lakes can become multiple lakes, or it's a very dynamic system. So we need to update all this data. Plus also whether a glacier system is in trans-boundary area, like the Subansiri catchment. All the glaciated terrain lie in Tibet, and the water-dependent community is in India.
Right.
We also have some dams in Indian side. Plus also it's a seismically active zone. So any small trigger can also create a massive problem for us. So to assess all that, we do have good satellite data that we can use. Plus, in the glaciated terrain which lies inside our territory, I think we can use UAVs. Now there's, this unmanned systems. So we can use them quite well, and we can use them to monitor regularly so that we can go into a very proactive measure.
Okay. Zerin Osho, now that's also an important point. One has to be now proactive instead of being reactive. But can you help us understand how bad the situation really is in your opinion? What does your data really reveal?
I think a lot of the points are already covered by my co-panelists and by yourself. The situation is not good. And that is not good is an understatement. It's quite dire right now. And as climate change and its impacts take way, we will see the frequency of such extreme events just go up. GLOF events, which are glacier lake outburst flooding events, which is what the Nepal flash floods are not new to India either. As you have rightly pointed out, Sikkim in 2023 was a very recent example of what has happened, and this is not something that is new. In fact, if you see the NDMA in India itself has a GLOF mitigation action arm, where the government has put in 150 crore rupees for end-to-end early warning systems. The problem is those early warning systems are still not in place, and this is by the government's own admission. So first things first is we need to have an inventorization of all our glaciers. There are 189 lakes, supraglacial lakes that have been mapped by the NDMA, which the NDMA classifies as extremely vulnerable and high risk lakes. Those lakes have to be mitigated first. We need to have end-to-end early warning systems be put in place. Of course, the China angle is a critical one. And I must highlight that there is an institution, an intergovernmental institution, which is headquartered in Kathmandu, which is called ICIMOD, where both India, China, Nepal, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Tibet, everybody is a member, a ratified member of ICIMOD. So to the point that my co-panelist was making about India becoming vocal at international forums and multilateral forums, ICIMOD is the direct area at the direct platform where data with regard to glaciers and movements of glaciers, glacial retreats, supraglacials, or even the lakes that are being formed with the frequency that they're forming must be shared. These are data points that are critical, and not just from the moral standpoint of sharing data, but also from a legal standpoint of sharing data.
But is that data sharing not happening? What is the problem there? You spoke about the concerns with regard to NDMA. I mean, of course, the early warning systems need to be strengthened and we need to move faster on that aspect. But what about the data sharing that's supposed to happen? Is it not happening? What's the problem with this body in Kathmandu that you're talking about?
So ICIMOD, from what I understand and the early reports that I have received and read so far, it seems that there was some sort of communication made by the Chinese officials to ICIMOD Secretariat and headquarters in Kathmandu. Now, there are two types of notifications that are made, actionable notifications and non-actionable or passive notifications. I am not privy to the nature of that advisory that was given by the Chinese government, but to what has happened and the disaster and the tragedy that has hit Nepal to the extent that it has, it should not be a passive notification. It needs to be an actionable one. And also by way of law, by way of common principles of law, there is something called as transboundary harm, which is a very well-established principle of common law, which makes it mandatory for countries to share critical data when disaster is to hit, when the disaster is brewing in a country that is not India, for instance. Here in this case, if it is China or Nepal or whichever other country outside the bounds of the Republic of India, it is their natural duty to inform the government of India that something is brewing. You need to share data. So there is no two ways about it, not just from the goodness of one's heart or moral responsibility, but even a legal one.
Okay,
and ICIMOD must be responsible.
What can India really do if China doesn't share that data tomorrow? Look what happened in 2017. China stopped sharing hydrological data. on the Brahmaputra River with India during peak monsoon season because of Doklam standoff, and the reason cited was technical problem, equipment repair. But at the same time, with Bangladesh, the data was being shared. So that's a real problem. What if tomorrow this is used as a strategy? If things go south, if the relations nosedive, if things go wrong, I mean, anything can happen.
You raise a fundamental question, Heena, that goes to the heart of the dilemma that downstream nations face. It's just not India. It's India, Nepal, even the friends of China like Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, they're all in the same boat because China does not have a water sharing treaty with any downstream country, nor does it have a comprehensive year-round real-time hydrological data sharing with any downstream country, or even an emergency notification mechanism with any country. So it's just not Nepal. It's with every country, whether it's a rival of China like India or a close friend of China. China does not respect international norms. For example, according to international law, the UN Watercourse Convention, transboundary rivers demand transboundary responsibility. If China had any transboundary responsibility that was willing to shoulder, then the death toll, the vast trail of death and destruction that occurred in Nepal could potentially have been reduced. Because China, let's be clear, has upstream stations, monitoring stations, hydrological monitoring stations all across the Tibetan headwaters of the various rivers, because Tibet is the source of most of Asia's major rivers. And China operates a vast network of hydrological monitoring stations that collect automated real-time data on river levels and upstream conditions.
Okay.
But this is the important point. Beijing's failure to provide an immediate emergency notification to Kathmandu of sudden water level spikes, debris dam formation, or other upstream anomalies resulted in precious time being lost. Had Kathmandu been informed in time, then the Nepalese authorities could have evacuated settlements, tracking routes, and vulnerable infrastructure, potentially reducing the death toll. So there are two aspects to this, Heena. One is that it was a nature that triggered this disaster, but human choices magnified this natural disaster because
I think that sums up, that statement of yours sums up what we saw happen in Nepal in the last 2 days specifically. And thankfully, you know, the area where tragedy hit, the population density was relatively lower. But like you mentioned in your argument that, you know, India and China actually doesn't share any kind of binding legal treaty for sharing river waters or, you know, data, etc. Can India explore something like that? Can that really happen now that SEO summit is coming up and then you've got the BRICS summit as well in India? Do you think something like this can be explored?
Are you asking me, Heena?
Yes, Mr. Chilani. Very quickly, then I'll go across to others for the same.
Okay, Heena, what China does is that it has hydrological data sharing agreements that are season specific, that are time bound, and dependent on advance payments.
Okay.
It provides seasonal monsoon season data to India, for example. India has to pay in advance. But when China wants, it weaponizes that data sharing by suspending that data sharing. It has done that repeatedly. You mentioned 2017. It did that even after the encroachments in eastern Ladakh led to a prolonged troop standoff between the two countries for several years. After 2020, it did not share any data with India, despite India's advance payments.
Right.
But India for many decades has been providing free hydrological data to the two countries located downstream to it, Bangladesh and Pakistan. Now, this is what the transboundary law, the international law called, the UN Water Course Convention demands.
Right.
That hydrological data should be shared. So to make China fulfill its obligations, forget about international law, at least under customary international law. China has refused to sign and ratify the UN Water Course Convention, but there is customary international law, and humanity is bound by that.
Absolutely.
Customary international law.
Okay, Mr. Govindra. Okay, finish your point, sir. Yes.
So this demands that India raise this issue at all multilateral forums. Because
and now is the time to do that. People's lives have been lost. Govind Raj, I want to give you the last word.
Yeah, I think the point raised here is like what we call it climate diplomacy. Because Nepal being economically weaker than China, and maybe we need to have a collaboration between countries like China, India, Nepal, Bangladesh, and other countries in the region, so that everyone is compelled to share these types of data, which is triggering huge losses of lives and properties, especially in downstream. As I hear that this has to be made mandatory, morally, legally, and internationally as well. Because now, because of this climate change and many other factors, and as you said, because this is not, it was densely populated area in Nepal, because it was trekking route, economically active areas, going towards the Kailas, Gosai Kunda, and many trekking routes. And densely populated, many small cities, Bazaro is there, because it's a narrow. So that's why we need to have some sort of climate diplomacy where China is forced to morally, legally, to share upstream hydrological data, whether it's a globe or ice melt or landslide, whatever it may be.
Right.
So we will have like a safer place here in downstream. And Nepal, almost all rivers, big rivers, that they originate from China.
Right.
If similar thing happens, like we'll lose all hydropower and we'll lose our all trekking areas and economic activities.
Absolutely. And the two big takeaways from this discussion clearly include, one, that we need to strengthen our early warning systems. When we have mechanisms in place, we need to be more proactive on those. And second, it is now time for India to raise the voice on this particular issue. And as Sir mentioned, climate diplomacy is something that's needed right now. And this is something that we must focus on aggressively, because it is about lives of people. So many lives, viewers, have been lost. So many people are still missing. They can't be contacted. So this is a tragedy that has unfolded in Nepal, and slowly rescue operations are intensifying. There are people waiting here in India and across the world who were in Nepal during this tragedy. They are anxiously waiting for that one phone call from their loved one. They still have hope. But then we also have to be prepared for similar disasters in the future. And for that, this is the time to take the right steps. You heard some solutions on the show today. We'll see what the governments, in India and, of course, around the world really